Well, if you're new with us this morning, just want to give you a little heads up with where we're headed here. We love to move towards deeper discussion around the table. And so we have a little teaching thought that's designed to queue up different spots of opportunities to discuss with a few people around your table. That's how we love to explore scripture and stories together. I was thinking this morning, I've learned a little bit about this they had these in ancient times, kind of in Jesus's period. In Greek culture, they had house parties. And house parties basically had two parts: eating food, and then they would do something that eventually we would get our word symposium from. They call it symposium, where they would bust out the best wine or offer drinks, and then they would start a discussion. And they would all usually sit around tables. They lounged around tables. They were a lot cooler back then. They were like lounging on cushions and stuff. And they would have someone typically who like initiates the discussion by offering some thoughts. And then they would just discuss it as part of what they did. And so we don't do exactly the same thing, but it's akin to that. That's why we choose to do it. Maybe we should have cushions. What do you guys think? Should we just... No. Carrie's like, I will definitely take my mid-morning nap if we have cushions. But that's part of what we do, because I think there was some wisdom in that way of being together, that we have something not only to learn from someone who has a microphone, but from each other around the table. So we try to create space to do that. I want to tell you a little bit about myself this morning. I was thinking of this story as it pertains to the story I want to tell to queue up discussion. I grew up as a PK. How many of you know what that means when I say it? A couple of us. Preacher's kid. There you go, JJ. Thanks. We actually have several preacher's kids whose parents were in Christian ministries in this church. That's weird. I don't know what that means about us, but let's not read into it too much. But yeah, this is really a support group. No, I was a PK, which means I grew up and my dad was on staff in churches. And of course, as you've seen here, PKs or pastors' kids get to be here the whole time, which means they're here at setup, they're here afterwards, they're bugging people, they're moving chairs, and I certainly was one of those kids. And we loved to play football in the park of the elementary school right next to us. And there was one particular time where we were playing football, and I found a gopher hole with my foot as I was running a route, and I totally twisted my ankle. And any filter that I had on my middle school mouth just came off when I fell down, and some new words that I had heard in middle school came out of my mouth. And it was kind of just a kid story in my life, but one of the things I remember is my friends, siblings came around me, some of which who were also kids of people on staff, and one of the first things they said was, "Be quiet. Stop talking. Don't say those things." And that's true. I shouldn't have been saying those things out of my mouth. But at the same time, the communication I heard in that moment was, despite whatever pain you're experiencing, what you do and say matters most. And how you present yourself in situations may be more than important than the pain you're experiencing right now. I don't think they were trying to communicate that to me, but that story was sort of emblematic. I was confused even as a middle schooler, like, can I express my pain? Or do I just need to say and do the right things here? And in my middle school brain, I think that experience and others like it maybe malformed two lives for me, where I learned how to navigate the role of being a pastor's kid and saying and doing the right things in church contexts. And then there was a secret life that I was living, questions I was asking, pain I was experiencing that didn't seem to fit that other life, or at least I couldn't figure out how to express in the other life that I was living. And that sort of duality is something that Jesus speaks into. I don't know if you've experienced that, the pressure to play a certain part, to live a certain role in a certain context as the way to be affirmed, to receive praise, to receive recognition. And that wears on your soul a little bit, doesn't it? And that was a part of the culture that Jesus wanted to correct and speak into of the people who are following God in his time. And so the scripture we're going to read today is a scripture where he's speaking directly into one of the results of that kind of culture of having two different lives, if you will, two different representations, or living two different stories, and how that's presenting itself in his day and how he wants to speak into that and offer a better way. So let's read. We're going to pick up, we've been all this kind of school year with a couple breaks, been in the series on the Sermon on the Mount, where we're taking these kind of penultimate teachings from Jesus, and we're just trying to digest and discuss them and see what they mean for our lives, because we think Jesus is great. He's good, and he's challenging sometimes and invites us into a deeper and better life. So let's read some of these words, and what I'm going to do is just ask how this strikes you. So as soon as I'm done reading these words, I'm going to turn you to 2 or 3 people around the table around you, and you're going to have 2 or 3 minutes just to give your kind of quick first reactions to Jesus' words. And share what comes to mind. Be open and honest if you'd like to share. So let's read this together. This is Matthew 6, 1 through 6. I've got it, Kara. It'll be up on the screen, and I did also print some paper copies if you're more tactile and you'd like to have it right in front of you, or you can pull it up on your phone. But let's read together. This is Jesus. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogue and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. All right, just for a few minutes, turn to 2 or 3 people around you. Just first responses. What's standing out to you? Discuss among yourselves, and then I'll pull us back together. I want to key in on 2 aspects of what Jesus says here, maybe to just stir up some discussion for you or further discussion. The way I kind of approach this, I just want to offer it to you as a kind of a cool way to tackle scripture like this that raises questions. And that I often come back to, and I've learned this from different resources, to the questions of what is the scripture saying to me, and what is the scripture saying about God? And so I want to kind of raise those 2 questions. And the first question is, what does this scripture say to me? And at first blush, it's like, man, I am susceptible to being hypocritical sometimes. Whether that's in middle school or sometimes I have experienced the temptation to do something and then show off about it, to do something because it's a role that I'm playing. And so it's convicting right away, something in my own life, and it raises questions that I've already heard in the room, like what are my motives? Like what am I actually doing this for? What do I hope to achieve through doing this? And I want to focus in on the word of hypocrite because it's a really interesting word. I think the word itself actually shares some of the dynamics that are going on for us as humans when we feel these temptations or pull to do this sort of thing. The word hypocrite is a Greek word for actor. That's why I asked you what your favorite actor was. The word itself, it means like the mask and then beneath the mask or behind the mask. And I don't know if you guys have seen these pictures of in Greek and ancient culture, they use these masks in theater to put on different emotions during their theatrical performances. These are some of the masks that would have been used even in Jesus' time in Greek theater. So this word itself means in many ways what we know it to mean today, but in that time too, it was a reference for this sort of thing. So it's an analogy that Jesus is giving. When we are doing things to be seen by others, it's like we're actors with a mask on, showing something different than is our true self. We're playing a role. So I think that raises a question for me when I encounter the tension in this scripture. What role do I feel like I'm playing in X scenario? Do I feel like I am living into a script that I feel like I need to live into in order to be seen, to be loved, to be recognized? Or is there something deeper going on? So that's what I see about myself. Is there a deeper invitation? And it's really interesting. The other thing I want to clue in on is this idea of reward. So it says that the hypocrites have already received their rewards. And now we live in a culture where I've heard the phrase, if it's not on the internet, it didn't actually happen. And like, we live in a social media culture where you're curating an image online sometimes, whether you like it or not. And we've even developed this belief that, oh, you didn't post about that? I didn't even know that even happened in your life, you know? And that's a really contorted reality to live in because you're constantly managing different masks or different ideas of yourself that are out there in the world. So what does it mean for us to receive a reward? Well, if we look at psychology, psychology would actually say that part of human desire and actually need is to be seen by other people. Like it meets a need in our life because we're connected human beings that we need to be perceived and noticed and acknowledged by other people. So it's one of those realities that is initially good that can be contorted if we start living into that reality where we're playing a part or playing a role. So that's a lot of what I hear when I ask the question, what is this saying about us? What is this saying about me? What does this say about God? I got to be honest, when I read this scripture and I hear this language of rewards, it gives me pause a little bit when it says that there is a reward for us in heaven. And it makes me think a little bit or question, is this a meritocracy? A relationship we have with God where you can imagine reading this scripture and looking at it and saying, our relationship with God is based on the things we accomplish in secret so that we can stack up rewards in heaven someday. And when we get to heaven, we're going to look around and say, ha, look at this secret life that I was living. God's going to reward me for this, and I've got more trophies in heaven than you do. But just tell me, in your spirit, do you think that's the true reality? Do you think that's God's? Is it a different way of playing a role? Because if we think about it that way, it becomes us playing a role for God, playing a role where we feel like we need to do something. And usually when there's this constraint and these questions and this contrast, Jesus is trying to get at something deeper. So it begs the question, what is this reward that God has for us in the kingdom of heaven? And I'm not going to discredit that he has rewards for us when we get into the future. I'm not going to say that Jesus doesn't have surprises to acknowledge the secret things that we do with him, but I think that there is something deeper. And I want to tell you a story of secret generosity that I found really cool, and I just want to look at this as a way to wonder, what does this mean in our lives? So I came across this story from Australia of secret grandparents. And there is this older couple with this little toy store in Australia. And in Australia, they call them laybys. Here, they call it layover. Or not layover, that's a plain thing. What do they call it? Layaways. Thank you. We call them layaways here. So if you don't understand layaways, you pick out an item, the store keeps it, and then you pay it off in chunks. And then when it's fully paid, you can come and get it from the store. So the secret grandparents, before Christmas, went and paid off everybody's lay-by debts so that they can immediately come and get what they're trying to purchase from the store. These guys wanted to be completely anonymous, and that's the way they stayed. It's just this beautiful picture. They didn't want credit, and the store owner who had to interact with them in order to fulfill the transaction asked them, why are you doing this? And they told him a story of being young parents and not being able to afford gifts for their kids, and now being in a completely different circumstance. And instead of saying, hey, look at us, we're rich, we can do this, we don't know who they are. And here we are in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in snow talking about something they did this Christmas. And I think that story holds a little bit of what the rewards that God is talking about. The reward itself is the adventure and experience we get to go on with God, where we're not focused on how we're being seen. We're focused on what God is up to. Now, I'm projecting, I don't know if they're Christians. I don't know that. I like to think that, but we don't know. But the same invitation is open to us when we take Jesus at his word here. And instead of thinking about what role am I playing as a Christian that other people see, it changes the question, what adventure is God inviting me on today? And ultimately, I've experienced the reward in my life is hearing something in my heart that God desires or seeing a dream of what could be true in the world. And instead of sharing that with everybody and saying, hey, look, we could do this cool thing, I get to do that with God. And then, just like becoming deeper friends with a friend on earth, the more experiences that you stack together, the deeper you know each other, the deeper you feel loved and known and belong with a community of people, the more experiences you have with him. And I think part of what Jesus is referring to in the deeper reward here is when we're not concerned about showing off, we're not concerned about how others will perceive this sort of thing in our life. We get to experience that sort of experience with God untainted by how other people are perceiving it. And we just get to grow in deeper knowledge of God, and God gets to know us in a deeper way. Because here's the deal. People outside who might hear about something you do don't know you. God knows everything about you. And he loves you. And he wants to be with you in these experiences. So those are some of the thoughts I have in terms of this scripture. And the ultimate result is that we get to live as people of integrity of soul, sincerity, and authenticity. And we don't have to feel like the middle school JD, where we're always operating in two different roles, playing two different parts, or multiple different parts. So those are some of my thoughts. I would love for us to keep talking around tables and hear some of your thoughts. I want to give you 3 guiding questions here. What continues to stand out to you from this text or what we've been talking about? What questions do you still have? It's okay to still have questions. And what do you think God might be saying to you or to us through this story in this text? Those are 3 questions. Don't have to answer them all. Find 2 or 3 people around you and spend maybe 2 minutes, if you're willing, each sharing some of those one response to one of those questions. All right? Let's do that.